Hi, I'm Gaz from the band Fabonacci. This is me doing the first video blog, which, funnily enough, was Dale's idea. Dale's the drummer from Fabonacci. It was Dale's idea, but this was 3 weeks ago. He had this idea and he said he was going to do a blog every week, but he isn't doing, so I thought I'd do the first one, try and G him up, you know. Fabonacci is a band, I think we started it about 5 or 6 years ago, recorded a couple of EPs, and did a load of gigs around the UK. Everybody in the band at that time, all old hands at the music thing, no audiences, that kind of thing, you know. It sort of died a death, really. We gave it up because it was taking too much of my time. I'm the bass player live, but I was sitting with Alan, who's the pianist and songwriter. I would sit with him and we would produce the songs together. I also wrote all the guitar parts, and at that time I was teaching the two guitarists the guitar parts, producing all the music, playing and writing the bass. It was just taking too much of my time. We couldn't see a way of splitting the tasks up sensibly, and it just kind of stopped functioning for a while, really. Over the following couple of years, we've all technically still been writing songs and releasing music, but none of us have actually got anything out, basically. We had a discussion about it, myself, Alan and Dale, who are the main proponents of the band. We had a chat about it and just decided that we're from a background of doing music together in bands. That was how we all started when we were, 15 or whatever, playing together. And the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, or the indie band attitude of the internet age, let's say, we found that approach, in other words, working separately, you would email tunes to each other, and I'd sit down and play a bit of bass on them, and then I'd get the guitar parts in from somebody else, and Dale would do the drums on his home studio, and I'd mix it all on mine and all that. We've just realised that it doesn't really motivate you, or doesn't motivate us, I should say, to get anything finished. It's too easy to just see sitting in front of a computer grinding your way through a tune on your own it can become a bit too much of a chore, and it certainly did with this band. We all agreed anyway that you've just got to get together. That's the trick. We just got to get together and do some work on music, and everything will stem from that. And sure enough, we've been getting together once a week for 3 weeks, and you get a lot done. We get a lot of work done every time we sit down, and there's a good couple of songs now that are starting to come together, and I'm trying to find a sound for the band. That's kind of my approach at the moment. I'm trying to decide exactly where we're coming from, the overall sound of the band, I mean. Yeah, it's worth mentioning the key kind of problem, if you like, with the original incarnation of Fabonacci was, in my opinion anyway, and I know Dale agrees to some extent, it was difficult to not sound quite bland, or what we consider to be quite bland. Alan would disagree. Alan, being the songwriter, he's got a lot more invested in it, I suppose. But we certainly saw it as it wasn't really going anywhere. I mean, it was difficult to market it as anything. The songs that we were writing 5 years ago, which we've got a couple of EPs of, we kind of packaged it all up and made it look nice. It was difficult to market those as anything other than sort of coffee table rock, really, with a big Radiohead pretension. That was where this band was coming from. I'm trying to find another way of doing it. I'm trying to find another way of approaching it, because this was the main problem, really. Everybody in the band are really good at what they do. They're all very talented musicians. In fact, Alan is certainly more talented in a sort of natural sense than I ever am at what I do. He's a better singer than I am a bass player. I think we'll do some interviews and all that. I think we'll do some quick video blogs and stuff with everybody. Now, the aims of this band, what are we going to do with it? Well, at the moment, this is another thing, I suppose. When you start playing together again, your first natural direction is to try and form a live band. You immediately start thinking about doing live stuff. I'm trying to hold that thought back, really, until the band has a very specific sound. Now, I wanted to control the sound myself, because in the first batch of material, it was very much Alan's choices that I would facilitate in terms of guitars and a lot of the mixing and stuff. It's not to say I didn't have any input, because I did, but it was more Alan's sound than mine. That's not to blame Alan for it sounded a bit, what I consider to be a bit bland. I just think we were throwing stuff together a bit too much, and this time round I want us to take a lot more time on everything really, and just really nail things down and try and get a really good package before I start worrying about doing anything live or whatever. I do want to do it live though, again, but if I'm going to do it live I want to do what I've never managed to do before, which is have a band that really sounds fantastic on stage. It's always been the letdown, in my opinion, given hindsight and all, in my opinion, with the projects that we've done together. We've never done ourselves justice live. It's so difficult to do, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I need to give it a bit more thought, but it's certainly to do with equipment. You know, it's certainly to do with getting the right equipment. It's certainly to do with getting the right people. As I was saying as well, I was teaching the guitarists how to do everything, how to play the parts that I wrote, and that, I come to think of it, was never going to work that well live, because it's not natural, and so much of the live sound, I think, is just people relaxing and being natural, you know, and playing naturally, bringing their own natural strengths to the sound of the band. That didn't happen, and that, it was very rigid, it was very kind of sometimes quite sluggish and turgid. Oh, there's a lot of melodic instruments as well, right? We had 2 guitars back then and a piano. We tended to just bang all those instruments on at all times, and whilst, you know, we knew what we were doing with dynamics, it was always a bit overcomplicated really. There was just too much going on a lot of the time. That's one of the things I've said specifically to everybody a few times we need to get away from. Now, I tend to get a bit pretentious and out there really with my production of this band, but Alan fortunately tends to pull me back from that, and Dale, when you put Dale behind a drum kit, it's pretty rock generally. You know, his approach is just always has been kind of Nirvana era Dave Grohl, and whilst he's technically a lot further on than that these days, it's always there. Yeah, that's kind of the starting blocks really. That's where we're at. We've got, I mean, all the equipment that I use as well, all the software that I use even, is a minimum of 5 or 6 years old. Strangely, given we've been doing music for so long and I do hip hop, we've only just really got to grips with, you know, like MIDI use and the like, which is, I mean, I'm quite embarrassed to admit it, but MIDI use and, you know, MIDI drum sounds and the sort of manipulation of sound that way, which is probably why, another reason why it didn't really work. The old incarnation of the band, we would play along to a sampler, you know, the drummer, sorry, would play along to a sampler in some songs, and that was, I don't know, that was what we were doing. No, that was what I was doing when I was 16, 17, really. So, you know, I really should have moved on in the last 15 years, and we never really did. If we're going to go down that road again, which we're not necessarily, but it's going to go down that road again, that certainly needs to be integrated a lot better. Just nothing worse than a band with that pretension these days who don't quite pull it off. A rock band who use samples, you know, a singer-songwriter who drops a beat loop in behind her tunes every now and then. It's just never been any good, really. It was okay when very few people used to do it 15 years ago, but I mean, it's not okay now. It's just, things have just moved on so totally. Anyhow, this is the first blog. That's about all I've got to say really, and I'll keep you up to date on anything interesting that comes out.